They didn't expect us to come back. Not after the collapse. Not after we'd burned our cities and drowned our coasts. Not after our own skies turned black from the fallout of our stupidity. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth was just another failed experiment. A violent, broken world that had finally destroyed itself. They monitored us, sure. Put us in their archives. Labeled us pre-warp, unstable, non-viable for integration. We were animals. Dangerous ones, maybe, but contained. They moved on. Built their shining empires. Traded knowledge and genetic purity like coins. Debated ethics in their sterile council chambers while we, the forgotten species, crawled from the rubble like cockroaches with nothing left but rage, hunger, and time. But they never looked close enough. Or maybe they did, and chose not to believe what they saw. What we were becoming. No peace talks, no delegation, no interstellar warning. Just a shadow. A silence so loud it drowned out every diplomatic frequency in orbit. It began over Kadronox Prime, a jewel of a world with oceans the color of sapphire and towers that reached into the stratosphere. A planet that hadn't seen war in 600 galactic cycles. Not since the Syndicate made sure the last rebellion was reduced to plasma ash. They ruled with precision, not cruelty, or so they told themselves. They had order, logic, protocol. Then came the shadow. One ship. One. No markings. No language transmitted. No symbol of peace. It didn't blink in through warp lanes like any civilized vessel. It tore through subspace like it was ripping muscle from bone. It appeared above the capital like a wound in the sky, black, angular, and silent. A blade made from nightmares and Earth's long-forgotten ghosts. Every sensor went dead. Every ship in orbit went dark. Kadronox airspace control scrambled protocols, tried to hail, tried to scan. Nothing. The battleship just hovered there, casting its impossible shadow over a city of billions. And the moment it did, every galactic visitor, every species who had ever thought themselves evolved, enlightened, superior, fell into a terrified silence. Because they knew. They'd seen this ship in ancient recordings, grainy footage buried deep in research vaults from when Earth launched its final defense system. An AI-augmented dreadnought meant to be Earth's tombstone. It was never meant to return. But here it was. Upgraded. Evolved. Angry. The name on its side was scorched and faded, but one word was still visible through the burn marks. Vengeance. The ship made no move. It didn't need to. Its presence alone spoke louder than any declaration. It said, "We survived." It said, "We remember what you did when we fell." It said, "We're not here to be friends." Inside that ship were men who'd been born in radiation shelters. Soldiers trained in gravity pits, fed lies, sharpened on pain. They didn't speak galactic standard. They didn't care to. They spoke in algorithms and war code, and they were staring down a world that had watched Earth die and had done nothing. The Syndicate scrambled fighters. Too slow. The first wave never even reached launch velocity. The Vengeance released a pulse. No visible weapons fire, no flashy lights, just a ripple that looked like a shimmer in the air. The enemy fighters fell from the sky like dying birds. Then the transmission came. One message. Human voice. Male. Low. Calm. Final. You were silent when Earth burned. Now you'll hear our reply. Silence fell heavier than the battleship's shadow. In the control spire of Kadronox Prime, High Warden Lurex stood frozen. His fingers hovered over the command interface, breath shallow, heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in decades. Not since the collapse of the Varnax Rebellion, when his fleet reduced 6 moons to dust. That had been clean, precise, predictable. But this was something primal. The humans were not following rules. They weren't playing the game. Is that real? One of the sub-commanders whispered behind him. Lurex didn't answer. He couldn't. Because yes, he remembered the broadcasts. Everyone in the higher echelons of the syndicate did. The humans' last days had been broadcast across fringe sectors for observation. They watched as Earth's atmosphere collapsed into fire, as the remaining governments nuked each other for scraps of power, as entire continents went silent. Most of the galaxy treated it as a cautionary tale, how primitive aggression would always eat itself. But some of them, especially the old guard, had warned, let them die, but don't forget them. Because the humans didn't fade out gently, they raged into the dark. And now, somehow, against every expectation, they'd returned, and not as diplomats, as something else. Lurex turned back toward the massive viewport, eyes fixed on the colossal battleship hanging in low orbit, its jagged frame stretching across the sky like a wound. He activated diplomatic frequencies, his voice faltering for the first time in over a century. This is High Warden Lurex of the Syndicate Governance Council. You are in restricted space. Identify your vessel and... The transmission cut off. No interference, just rejection. The human ship refused to even acknowledge his authority. Aboard the Vengeance, silence reigned as well. But it was a different kind. It was the silence of readiness. In the command deck, deep beneath layers of reinforced alloy and old Terran steel, Commander Reddick stood like a stone. He was in his late 40s, though in space years that meant little. His eyes were steel gray, skin weathered from gravity training and UV burns. His left arm was artificial, not sleek and polished like syndicate implants, but raw, brutal machinery. It hissed softly as he clenched his fist, watching Kadronox rotate beneath them like a ripe fruit ready for crushing. They're scanning us, his second-in-command, Brenner, said, without looking up from the console. Let them, Reddick muttered. They won't understand half of it. They're mobilizing ground defenses, too. Good, he said. Let them feel useful before it ends. Brenner hesitated. Still no response to the message? Nope. You think they'll talk? Reddick turned and met his eyes. They watched us burn, Bren. Watched it live, analyzed it, cataloged our extinction like it was a weather pattern. We sent out calls for aid, signals, screams. They didn't answer. Brenner lowered his eyes. He remembered the old stories. He was second generation, born on Europa 13, deep in the underground citadels, raised on rations and vengeance. His father died testing exosuits in Mars gravity tunnels. His mother was part of the crew that first reactivated an orbital railgun buried in debris from the Great Collapse. Their history wasn't taught in schools, it was carved into them. Earth died screaming. And no one came. Down on Kadronox, the syndicate scrambled. Anti-orbital defenses came online, sleek towers designed more for deterrence than warfare. They had been useful during pirate raids, sure. Against primitive civilizations, no problem. But nothing in their architecture accounted for the kind of ship now hanging above them. It didn't match any existing designs. Its hull wasn't composed of the usual neutron composite alloys. It was a blend of scavenged alien tech, earth-forged steel, and what analysts labeled adaptive hostility matrices. In simpler terms, it was built for war and learning. Every encounter only made it stronger. Do we launch a first strike? Asked Subwarden Kiros, beads of sweat running down his pale green skin. He was from Tilani 6, a species known for logic and diplomacy, neither of which felt particularly useful now. Lurex stared at him, jaw tight. You want to launch first at a species that was declared extinct, yet somehow returned with tech we can't even decode? Kiros stayed quiet. I want full fleet activation. Mobilize all orbital drones, reroute energy from domestic grids, get the entire sector on red alert. A pause. And prepare evacuation protocols for high-priority personnel. The last part hung in the air like a death sentence. The Vengeance waited, not because it needed to, but because waiting made them sweat, made them remember. In the barracks, the soldiers were quiet. These weren't green recruits. These were hand-selected, battle-bred veterans who had earned their spots through scars and sacrifice. Most of them had never set foot on Earth, but they carried its memory like religion. Cole, a sergeant with one eye and a scar that split his cheek to his throat, sat sharpening a blade that had never left his hip since Titan. "Think they'll run?" someone asked. Cole didn't stop sharpening. "No." "Why not?" "Because they think they're still in charge." A quiet chuckle. "Stupid bastards." He paused, glanced around. "You know what they did to my father?" he asked. Nobody answered. They knew, but he told it anyway. He was part of the ARC project, final batch of launches before the blackout, got captured mid-orbit. Syndicate patrols flagged their ship as rogue colonists, locked them in cryo, studied them like insects for 10 years, then dumped the bodies in a star to cover the data trail. He looked down at the blade. "This ain't for battle," he said. "This is for the first one of those bastards I see face to face." Meanwhile, back in orbit, the Syndicate finally grew impatient. 3 cruisers disengaged from formation and approached the Vengeance, sleek, polished, elegant. Each one boasted plasma lances and EMP arrays capable of turning a pirate armada into dust. They flanked the Vengeance, issuing demands, legal citations, even threats in over 50 galactic dialects. The human ship didn't answer. It just opened its hull. What emerged wasn't a missile. It wasn't a beam of light or a glowing orb of energy. It was a coffin. Jet black, smooth, emblazoned with a single human handprint burned into the top. It drifted slowly toward the nearest cruiser. Lurex watched the feed with confusion. "What is that?" "It's not transmitting any signals, sir. No energy readings either." "Then it's a message." The cruiser tried to capture the object. Bad mistake. The moment they activated their tractor beam, the coffin unfolded, not mechanically, but like it was alive. Tendrils of nano-steel exploded from within, latching onto the cruiser's hull like parasites. In under 10 seconds, the entire ship was being eaten, not destroyed, not exploded, consumed. Metal peeled back like flesh. Screams echoed from intercepted crew channels. By the time the tendrils withdrew, nothing remained but shredded hull and drifting bodies. The other 2 cruisers turned and ran. But the Vengeance didn't pursue. It didn't need to. The message was clear. No negotiations, no mercy. You watched us die. Now you watch yourselves. Inside the human warship, Commander Reddick leaned forward. "Now, we talk." Brenner activated the comms again, this time with a direct frequency tied to the Syndicate's High Council. "Transmission open," he said. Reddick straightened, cleared his throat. "Galactic Syndicate, this is Commander Reddick of the Earthborn Alliance Fleet. You are witnessing the return of a species you left to rot." He paused. "You watched the fires. You cataloged the deaths. You ran your simulations and decided Earth wasn't worth saving." Another pause. "But we didn't die." His voice grew colder. "We rebuilt. We relearned war. We tore apart your forgotten tech, cracked it open, rewired it, weaponized it. Every dead orbit became a lab. every grave a factory. And now, he stood up, walking slowly towards the front viewport, where the full curve of Kadronox Prime glowed beneath them. Now you see what your silence bought. He stared straight into the camera. This is justice. And with that, the vengeance moved. Not fast, not with weapons blazing, it simply began its descent. Not toward a military base, not toward a defense hub. Toward the diplomatic tower at the heart of Kadronox's capital. They weren't targeting soldiers. They were targeting the ones who signed the treaties, the ones who sat safe while Earth choked. Syndicate warships scrambled again, hundreds now. The whole system came alive with alarms, shields, emergency protocols. It didn't matter. The vengeance dropped through orbit like a falling god. And behind it, other ships followed, dozens of them, smaller but still deadly. The Earthborn fleet, humanity's ghosts, the Forgotten Army. No two ships looked the same. Some were boxy, others jagged, patched together from ruins and space junk. But all of them bore the same mark, the handprint. It was no longer a symbol of peace. It was a brand, a warning. And as the fleet descended on Kadronox, the Galactic Syndicate realized too late. The humans had never planned to talk. They came to make the universe remember. Kadronox Prime had never heard its own people scream like this. The city's towers, glass, titanium, carbon-laced alloys forged over centuries of sterile peace, now groaned under the weight of sonic terror. Emergency sirens cried out across the capital, but they were drowned by something older, something worse. The unmistakable wail of helpless civilians realizing their paradise was no longer protected. For centuries, the Syndicate sold security like a religion. Their citizens were promised order, guaranteed peace. They built their confidence on sterile governance, clean weapons, and clean wars. Always fought far away, always off-world, always handled before the media cycle caught wind. This wasn't that. This was something ancient, something they'd forgotten, something human. From the sky, fire rained, not from missiles or orbital cannons, but from the hull plating of descending dropships grinding through the atmosphere. The vengeance didn't lead the invasion. It hovered above like a sentinel, the eye of the storm, watching as smaller ships unfurled like wings, spiraling toward the ground with relentless, silent coordination. No declarations, no rules of engagement, just war. Commander Reddick stood at the edge of the drop bay, his armor matte black, patched in places where plasma had scarred it in old fights no one remembered but him. He looked down through the reinforced glass, watching the capital swell beneath them. Streets lined with monorail tracks, floating transports, and spiraling civic towers. In moments, it would be rubble. Brenner approached, helmet clipped to his side. His face was hard but pale. "They're evacuating the civilian levels," he said. "Too slow," Reddick replied. "We warned them." Brenner nodded. "You know what the Syndicate calls this district?" he asked, gesturing down. Reddick raised an eyebrow. "The Garden. No factories, no barracks, just politicians and commerce lords sipping biosynth wine and signing death warrants with sterilized fingers." Reddick cracked his knuckles. Perfect place to start. The first boots hit the ground like thunder. Unlike the sterile, symmetrical Syndicate armies, Earthborn soldiers hit like animals. Their armor was heavy, rough, scarred from recycled combat plating. Their rifles didn't emit elegant pulses. They roared, spitting metal slugs supercharged with magnetic bursts. Nothing about them was clean. Because Earth hadn't survived clean, they didn't believe in non-lethal. They believed in lessons. A squad of Syndicate guards formed a perimeter at the Western Plaza. Blue armor, polished, fresh. They barked in formation, raised their pulse rifles in unison. They had trained for pirate incursions, for economic protests, for quiet, swift suppression. What dropped into their lines wasn't an enemy. It was a force. Sergeant Cole was first in. He didn't fire at range. He landed inside their formation. On purpose. Before the guards could recalibrate, Cole had already buried his shoulder into the first soldier's chest, knocking him off his feet. His blade came out in a blur, old steel, sharpened to a near molecular edge, and slit through composite armor like it was made of silk. 3 syndicate soldiers died before they could scream. The others tried to retreat. Bad move. Earthborn troops didn't chase. They hunted. And the Capitol Plaza turned red. Inside the government spire, High Warden Lurex watched the feed disintegrate. One by one, surveillance drones went dark. Field commanders went silent. Static filled the once calm command bridge. "We should have talked to them," Kiros snapped, panic in his voice now. Lurex didn't respond. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was staring at a hollow frame on his desk. A painting, actually. A depiction of the Galactic Council standing over a scorched Earth, observing it like it was a failed experiment. He'd always liked that piece. Now he couldn't look at it, because the experiment wasn't dead. It had learned, and it was angry. "How did we let this happen?" Kiros said, turning to him. "They were extinct." "No," Lurex said slowly. "They were unwatched." Kiros blinked. "They needed us," Lurex continued, not really speaking to anyone anymore. "We saw the fires, the famines. We intercepted their final transmissions, but we labeled them a threat to stability. We wrote them off, said they were incompatible with galactic progress. And now, they returned with a new kind of progress," Lurex said. Kiros swallowed hard. "What kind?" "The kind that doesn't forgive." Back in the streets, the massacre continued. Human squads fanned out, not wildly, but with methodical precision. They avoided civilian shelters, ignored medical buildings, bypassed orbital elevators. They were after specific targets. Those who sat in safe rooms during Earth's death. Those who dismissed the old distress signals with sterile language. No intervention authorized. Internal collapse. Not worth resource allocation. Now those same cowards ran through the streets, their flowing robes drenched in sweat, trying to bribe, beg, or scream their way into escape transports. None got out, because the vengeance jammed every port, every launch pad, every system that once guaranteed them immunity. There would be no immunity today. Aboard the ground HQ, Reddick opened his private comm line. "Operation Anvil is active," he said. Brenner nodded. "Phase 2? Reddick turned toward the screen. A syndicate dignitary, panting, filthy, desperate, was being dragged into a side room by 2 Earthborn officers. His identity tag blinked red. "Class 1 clearance, culpable party." "Time for the trials," Reddick said. "They'll expect courtrooms," Brenner muttered. Reddick gave a thin smile. "They'll get one." The trials were nothing like the syndicate's elegant hearings. There were no robes, no audiences, no panels of debate. Just a single room, a table, a human commander, and a datapad listing every intercepted denial transmission from Earth's last days. Each dignitary, diplomat, technocrat, syndicate minister was given exactly 2 minutes to explain. None succeeded. One tried to cry. Reddick stared at her through cold eyes. "You think your tears are worth more than the ones we buried in Martian dust?" She was escorted out the side door. The sentence was always the same. No appeal, no negotiation, just a bullet. One by one, the architects of Earth's abandonment were reduced to bodies in a growing pile. And the galaxy learned something it had forgotten. Humanity didn't need forgiveness. It needed closure. Out across the city, resistance stiffened. A few syndicate defense cells managed to regroup. They weren't cowards. They were professionals. Elite units, trained in planetary defense, armored in prototype shielding. They managed to hold 2 city sectors, pinning down human units in tight alleys and broken causeways. Then Reddick sent in the wolves. They weren't a formal unit. They didn't wear insignia. They didn't march. They stalked. Each one was ex-Black Ops, failed assassins, saboteurs, test subjects from Earth's final Dark War programs. They didn't talk much. They didn't ask for orders. They were dropped from orbit at hypersonic speed and landed so fast their bones cracked. They wore no armor, just adaptive skin suits and optical dampeners. In 15 minutes, the resistance was dead. Not defeated. Dead. No gunfire. No screams. Just nothing. And when Syndicate Command tried to call for reinforcements from the outer fleets, nothing came, because the Vengeance had locked the sector, and every outer fleet ship that even looked toward Kadronox found itself caught in gravitational dead zones and hacked relay loops that turned their engines inward. In the end, the outer fleets stopped trying, because even they realized humanity had become the monster they were all afraid of. By the end of the second day, the skies cleared, not from smoke, but from resistance. Every major syndicate spire was either demolished or occupied. The Vengeance hovered above it all like a vulture king. Commander Reddick stood on the balcony of the former High Warden's office. He looked out over a city reduced to smoke trails and flame-lined silhouettes. Brenner stood beside him, helmet in hand. "You think it's enough?" he asked. "No," Reddick said quietly. "But it's a start." They watched a group of captured officials being marched across the courtyard. No chains, just fear, the kind that couldn't be wiped clean with treaties or credits. "They'll call us terrorists," Brenner said. "They already did," Reddick replied. "When we asked for food, when we begged for aid, when our kids starved and they sent surveys instead of medicine." He took a deep breath. "They called us savages. Now they'll get to see what that really means." The human fleet didn't linger. They took what was necessary. Data, war records, access codes. They left the bodies. They left the warnings. And when they lifted back into orbit, they transmitted a single message to the wider galactic net. No encryption, no clever subtext, just one sentence. "Earth lives. Remember that." Then they were gone. Not because they couldn't take more, but because they wanted the rest of the galaxy to wonder if they were next. The galaxy didn't sleep after Kadronox. The images were broadcast across half the settled sectors before the Syndicate could suppress them. Leaked footage from shattered news drones showed armored humans storming spires, dragging senators through burning streets, holding mock trials, and handing down death without pause. No editing could soften it. No diplomatic statement could explain it away. The Earthborn hadn't just returned. They'd ripped the mask off the Syndicate's perfect civilization and forced the galaxy to stare at its own reflection. And worst of all, some started to agree. In the outer fringe systems, murmuring spread like wildfire. Words that once got you jailed were now whispered in bunkers, broadcast from hacked relays, scrawled in back alley walls. Earth was right. The Syndicate watched them die. What if we're next? The outcasts of the galaxy, the ones who'd spent decades mining dead moons for crumbs, the ones who lived under towering city blocks while elite species floated in zero-G palaces. They saw the humans not as monsters, but as proof that revenge was still possible. The Syndicate called them terrorists, but the streets started calling them something else. The Returners. On Veltar 3, a swamp world governed by corporate guild interests, the ruling caste assembled an emergency council. They hadn't been attacked. Yet. But their security networks had picked up encrypted chatter from the outer slums, talk of sleeper cells, Earthborn sympathizers, even hidden arsenals stashed during the Guild Wars decades earlier. "What if they come here next?" one of the ministers asked, shivering under layered silks. "They won't waste their firepower on a trade colony," another scoffed. "They didn't burn Kadronox for profit," the first minister snapped. "They burned it for memory." A silence fell over the chamber. And that's when the feed was hacked. Across every screen, speaker, and interface in the room, a single phrase began repeating in dozens of dialects. "Earth remembers. Earth remembers. Earth remembers." The council adjourned in panic. That night, someone painted a human handprint across the central spire's walls. Dark red, thick, wet. Security confirmed it wasn't paint. Back aboard the Vengeance, Commander Reddick sat in the dim tactical chamber, a map of the galaxy sprawling across the holodisplay before him. Dozens of red markers pulsed like infected wounds, syndicate territories, sectors where humanity had been blacklisted, denied aid, exiled. He sipped from a metal flask. Not synth liquor. Real whiskey, distilled on Mars Station 3, harsh and biting. Like home. Brenner entered quietly, dropping a datapad on the table. "More defectors," he said. Reddick raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Heliox rebels, scavenger clans from the Ash Belt, and one of the old gene cults from Regulus. They're offering ships, troops, intel." Reddick studied him for a long moment. "Why?" Brenner hesitated. "Because we did what they couldn't." Reddick leaned back. "You think this becomes a war?" "It already is," Brenner said quietly. "We just lit the fuse." Reddick took another sip. "And when it burns down?" "Either the syndicate burns with it. Or we do," Reddick finished. The Syndicate High Council convened for the first time in over a decade. Deep in the heart of Seriton Station, a citadel floating within a white dwarf's halo, the remaining leaders gathered under full emergency protocol, armed escorts, jammed transmissions, no recordings allowed. They argued for hours. Some demanded diplomacy, an apology, even reparations. Others howled for escalation, fleet deployment, total extermination of every human ship in the stars. "They're a contagion," Minister Velerin hissed. "A species built on vengeance. If we don't crush them now, we never will." But not everyone agreed. Minister Threx, a reptilian strategist who had overseen 4 sector stabilizations, stood slowly and unrolled a tattered data banner. It displayed Earth's final distress calls, visuals, audio, the desperate, dying signals humanity had sent into the void while it burned. "This is what they sent," he said, "and this is what we ignored." He looked at the room, his voice grave. "We told ourselves they were savages, and then we acted like gods." The room fell silent. Then Velerin snapped. "You'd excuse the slaughter of Kadronox." "I'd prevent the next one," Threx growled. But no one in that room had a solution, because none of them understood humans. Not really. They had treated Earth like a liability. Now Earth had become a myth. Elsewhere, the myth spread. On Zillion's moons, street kids wore makeshift Earthborn emblems, jagged handprints on chest plates. On pirate ships, old Terran war songs, once considered outlawed transmissions, played over intercoms before raids. Ash to Sky. March of the Forgotten. Steel Will Rise. A movement was growing, one not controlled by Reddick or even humanity itself. It was contagious. People didn't just want vengeance anymore. They wanted justice, and Earth had proven it could be done without permission. Inside a hidden chamber deep within the Vengeance, A figure sat alone. Not Reddick, not Brenner. Her name was Wren. Human. Mid-30s. Cybernetically enhanced, but rough-cut. Eyes twitching with neural lag, voice tuned by surgery, not luxury. She wasn't a soldier. She was something worse, a strategist. She studied planetary weaknesses the way artists studied canvas. She had designed the coffin weapon that devoured the Kadronox cruiser. She'd built viruses that could rot digital architecture in seconds. And now she was watching a series of galactic news feeds rerouting into her station. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "It's working." Then she opened a new file. Target list, Phase 2. 15 names, 15 systems, not military targets, historical betrayers, archivists, media moguls, cultural architects who shaped the syndicate narrative against Earth during its downfall. Wren didn't believe in war. She believed in erasure. And it had just begun. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Polmera, a small farming community huddled around a stolen comms rig. They weren't rebels. They weren't even fighters. Just humans. Third-gen settlers. Technically citizens of the syndicate, ones who'd had to hide their bloodline to avoid sanctions, breeding restrictions, and surveillance. Now they watched the footage of Kadronox with wide, wet eyes. Not in horror, in awe. One old man whispered, "They came back." His granddaughter nodded, clenching her small fists. "Not just came back," she said. "They're winning." Back in Syndicate core space, fear became policy. Humans, even half-bloods, even suspected sympathizers, were detained, interrogated, exiled. Embassies closed. Trade routes tightened. Colonies purged databases of human history, erasing it like a disease. But it was too late. Because the shadow of that battleship, the one that hung over Kadronox, the one that didn't fire a single weapon yet still silenced an empire, had never truly left. It lived in every whisper, every skipped heartbeat when a long-range scanner blinked, every rumor of black ships in the dark, and in the blackness beyond, the vengeance drifted. Not like a ship, like a curse, its next destination unknown, but it carried a cargo no one could quantify, memory, and memory, real memory, is heavier than any bomb. The aftermath of Kadronox wasn't measured in bodies. It was measured in silences, in meetings never held, plans never completed, systems never restarted. Planet after planet adjusted schedules, restructured policies, all under a quiet, fearful premise no one dared say aloud. We could be next. The galactic core convulsed, not with war, but paranoia. Trade slowed. Surveillance networks spun red. Resources were funneled into defense, into hidden bunkers and orbital shields no one had tested in decades. Even outer planets began building weapons again. Real ones. Kinetic. Brutal. Illegal. The Syndicate's illusion of stability fractured not because Earth had returned, but because Earth had shown what a lie it was. Within the inner sanctum of the Vengeance, Commander Reddick sat alone. The war map floated silently above the holotable. Clean lines, glowing red targets, movement across fringe sectors. Every week their influence stretched further. Outposts pledged loyalty, fleets disbanded out of fear or admiration. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not today. Because hours earlier, he had received a data feed from Sector 9K, a mining belt that once belonged to Earth before the collapse. A new Earthborn cell, one not under his command, had executed 75 civilians in a public square. Syndicate citizens, unarmed. The message they broadcast after was worse than the act. We don't want apologies. We want balance. 75 dead for 75 years of silence. Reddick clenched his jaw. This wasn't war. It was rot. He called for Brenner. Brenner arrived moments later, still in combat gear, rifle slung low, visor cracked from a skirmish on Heliox station. He dropped the datapad on the table, breathing heavily. "You saw the footage," he said. Reddick nodded. "It wasn't sanctioned. They went rogue." Brenner sat down, exhaling hard. "Wren said it would happen." "Yeah," Reddick replied, rubbing his eyes. "But not this soon." They were Earthborn, yes, but not soldiers, not trained, just broken people with power, finally allowed to hit back, and power, without restraint, mutates. "They call themselves the Ash Reclaimers," Brenner said bitterly. "Say they're taking the fight to the culture that erased us." Reddick didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "You think they're wrong?" Brenner looked up. His face wasn't angry. It was tired. "I think they're not you." In the Galactic underground, Wren watched the situation unravel from a cold observation chair buried beneath the Vengeance's main data vault. Her mind was already 10 moves ahead. While the others argued about strategy and image, she was sorting nodes, signals, recruitment chatter, internal fractures forming between Earthborn units. The Reclaimers weren't alone. 2 more splinter groups had emerged. The Red Stone Pact, operating in stealth, targeting science archives and cultural vaults, not for destruction, but corruption. They weren't just killing, they were rewriting the past, inserting false records, warping timelines so future generations would believe Earth had been betrayed 1,000 times more than it had. And the Iron Dissenters, a brutal paramilitary outfit composed of failed human cloning experiments. They didn't want retribution. They wanted eradication, a clean sweep of syndicate space to make room for pure Earth-descended bloodlines. Wren didn't report them. She watched, because part of her wanted to see where it all led. Meanwhile, across Syndicate core worlds, crackdowns accelerated. Earthborn sympathizers were executed without trial. Entire human-descended colonies were liquidated, assets frozen, tech confiscated, residents vanished. The Council's new protocol was called Code Ashfall. Under it, any world found harboring Earthborn intel or operatives could be stripped of syndicate status and forcibly vacated. They didn't just fear invasion anymore. They feared contagion. On the neutral moon of Pharos 4, a secret meeting unfolded. 12 species. No flags, no translators, just one shared goal. Contain Earth. High Warden Velerin chaired the council. His voice was clipped, cold. "We let them teach the stars how to bleed," he said. "Now they want to rewrite the very laws of peace. We do not stop them with kindness." Representatives from the Myrixian Order, the Varnak guilds, even the anti-syndicate Marat hordes, nodded in grim silence. This wasn't about loyalty to the syndicate anymore. This was about survival. They began drafting a joint operation, Operation Final Light. It would involve the use of forbidden tech, planetary-level weaponry outlawed after the Arcadia Accords. The goal was simple. Find the Vengeance, destroy it, erase every name attached to Earth. But Earth wouldn't sit still, because far from the core sectors, in a dying system called Sol Vega, the humans had begun building something new. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a nation. A city forged into the bones of an asteroid belt, part shipyard, part fortress, part memorial, the remnant bastion. It flew no flag, answered to no planetary laws. But its message was clear. We are Earth. We are still here. And we are not sorry. Refugees arrived daily, some human, some not. Pilots, engineers, lost cultures crushed under the Syndicate's heel for decades, and beneath the bastion, an army swelled. But it was not united, because in the lower decks, in smoke-filled halls and hacked lecture chambers, arguments raged. Some wanted peace, true peace, a home, a border, a chance to build instead of burn. Others wanted fire, to wipe the galaxy clean and make sure no one ever forgot what Earth endured. And in the shadows, deeper still, there were those who no longer wanted justice. They wanted dominion. Commander Reddick visited the bastion quietly. No escort, no rank on display, just a man walking among his people. He found children drawing pictures of battleships, of burning towers. He found poets composing verses not of sorrow, but of conquest. He found the seeds of a future he didn't recognize. And when he stood before a steel statue of the first Earthborn AI, the one who activated Vengeance's war protocols, he read the inscription with hollow eyes. Mercy is for those who remember how to use it. He didn't speak for hours. Back aboard the Vengeance, Reddick sat with Brenner in silence. The map before them blinked with red lights. New targets, new betrayals, new ghosts to chase. But the silence between them was heavier. Finally, Brenner said, "How far do we go?" Reddick didn't answer right away. Then, "Until they stop forgetting us?" Brenner exhaled, his voice low. "And if we forget who we are?" Reddick looked at him, and for the first time since this war began, he didn't have an answer. The remnant bastion drifted quietly through the graveyard of asteroids surrounding Sol Vega, like a steel god sleeping between the bones of dead planets. From the outside, it looked like a fortress. Inside, it was a storm. In the Founders' Hall, the largest central chamber deep in the belly of the bastion, voices thundered, fists slammed into steel tables, and the War Council splintered in real time. "We didn't claw our way back from extinction just to sit around and play diplomat," shouted Lieutenant Serac, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We came to finish what they started." "We've finished nothing," barked Major Harn, grizzled, gray-bearded, eyes burned out by orbital flashbangs and replaced with tactical implants. "Kadronox was a warning shot. If we keep burning worlds, we'll become what they said we always were." "You're too soft, Harn," Serac spat. "You think mercy builds empires? They erased Earth from their archives. I want their memory burnt from the stars." Dozens of officers shouted over each other. Some wore the black of the original Vengeance crew. Others were new, defectors from fractured colonies, revenge-driven youth raised on war stories and pain. They all bore the Earthborn handprint over their hearts. But the meaning of that symbol was no longer the same. In one corner, sitting in silence, Ren watched it all unfold. She didn't speak. She just listened. And she recorded everything, because this wasn't a war council anymore. It was a powder keg. Elsewhere on the bastion, Commander Reddick stood alone in the chamber of memory, a narrow hall built into the ship's spinal column. The walls were covered in etched names, real names, men, women, children lost during the collapse, each one painstakingly carved by hand over the last 7 years. His father's name was there. So was his brother's and his wife's. The pain didn't fade. It never had. But lately, it had been replaced by something worse. Doubt. He didn't doubt the mission. The syndicate deserved to fall. But what about everything growing around it? Entire battalions had broken off from command to start their own campaigns. Civilian transport ships were being commandeered without oversight. Supply raids against neutral planets, unauthorized drone strikes, rogue broadcasts demanding unconditional surrender from systems that hadn't even declared sides yet. And worse, the executions. He didn't order them. No one had. But they kept happening, carried out in the name of Earth, by people who called themselves soldiers, but who fought like butchers. Back on the Vengeance, Brenner barged into Reddick's quarters. His face was pale, fists clenched around a data slate. "You need to see this," he said, voice shaking. Reddick scanned the contents. His jaw tightened. A newly formed splinter faction, calling themselves the Children of Ash, had taken responsibility for detonating an EMP nuke over the Coralune skyfields, an ancient atmospheric archive that had floated in the skies of the Coralune homeworld for over 700 years. It wasn't a military target. It wasn't even political. It was culture, history, knowledge, gone in seconds. Reddick dropped the data slate on the table like it was infected. They said the syndicate let Earth's libraries burn, Brenner said, so now they're balancing the scales. That wasn't a battle, Reddick muttered. That was vengeance on autopilot. Brenner stared at him. So stop it. 2 hours later, Reddick stood before the entire Vengeance crew in the war bay, hundreds of Earthborn soldiers, officers and commanders staring at him from the shadows of the ship's steel belly. His voice was low, measured, but unflinching. We are not animals. Silence. We did not rise from the ash so we could become what the galaxy feared. We rose to remind them what they created, what they left behind. He paused, scanning the room. But now we stand at a line, and I see some of you ready to cross it, ready to let hatred do the leading. No one moved. You want to strike terror? Fine. You want justice? I'm with you. But we do this the human way, the way they said we couldn't, the way that proves we're more than the ashes they left us in. A younger officer stepped forward. Sir, with respect, some of us don't care about how we're remembered. We care about making sure they never forget. A murmur rippled through the bay. Reddick's jaw tightened. You burn too much of the galaxy, and there's nothing left to rule. No one left to fear you. Only hatred. He turned and walked off the platform. The room didn't cheer. It didn't rebel either. It just simmered. And Reddick knew he hadn't ended the fire. He'd only slowed it. Meanwhile, across the stars, the Syndicate's retaliation came swift. Operation Final Light had begun. It started with the ambush at Helix Verge. 3 unregistered Earthborn scout ships caught in a grav well and disintegrated by quantum mines. Then came the bombing of Delta Saros, a human-aligned colony harboring defectors. The Syndicate dropped a planetary denial weapon. It didn't explode. It simply shut off every electrical system for 6,000 miles. The population froze, suffocated, starved. Then came the propaganda. Newscasts rebranded the Earthborn as planet killers. Ancient footage of human wars was recycled and laced with fabricated voiceovers. Earth nuking its own cities, Earth destroying its own moon, Earth unleashing bioplagues. All fake, but believable, because the truth didn't matter. Fear did. On fringe colonies, Earthborn agents were hunted like wild dogs. Some begged for Reddick to retaliate, to nuke Syndicate core worlds, to burn their homes the way Earth had been burned. But Reddick refused. So the splinter groups did it anyway. They hijacked an old Syndicate colony ship, filled it with nuclear waste, and crashed it into Aureli's Prime, the crown jewel of Syndicate architecture. 3 million dead. A message etched into the wreckage. For the billion souls you watched die. Reddick didn't order it, but now the galaxy believed he did. The vengeance became a symbol of something bigger than any commander could control. To Earthborn purists, it was justice incarnate. To Syndicate loyalists, it was terror on wings. To the broken, the desperate, the forgotten, it was hope. But to Reddick, it was beginning to feel like a tomb. Wren approached him in the observation hall. Her eyes were calm, almost curious. You look tired, she said. I feel buried. You still believe we can steer this? I have to, Reddick replied. If we lose control... Wren tilted her head. We already have. She handed him a new slate. It wasn't a battle plan. It was a list of names. Earthborn commanders, operatives, agents, Every single one of them had begun acting independently, some with pure motives, some not. "Within a month," she said, "they'll start fighting each other." Reddick stared at the list and knew it was true. The war for Earth's vengeance was ending. The war for its soul was about to begin. The first shot wasn't fired by the syndicate. It came from an Earthborn rifle, a clean kill, silent, efficient. One Earthborn officer executed by another, and just like that, the war inside the war began. They called it the fracture. At first, no one used the word. Too dangerous, too real. But you could feel it, in the way squads stopped sharing codes, the way patrols accidentally stepped on each other's territories, the way senior officers vanished in the night and no one asked questions. Reddick saw it coming. But even he hadn't expected how fast the cracks would spread. The remnant bastion, once a sanctuary, turned paranoid overnight. Doors required double authentication. Access corridors closed. Mess halls were segregated, not by race, not by rank, but by belief. On one side stood those loyal to Reddick's command doctrine: disciplined retaliation, targeted strikes, order before chaos. On the other, the followers of Serac, younger, louder, militant zealots who believed in pure, uncontrolled vengeance. They didn't want justice anymore. They wanted to break the galaxy. "We waited too long," Serac told his growing followers in the bowels of the bastion. His face was wild with conviction. His body armor was custom, layered with salvaged bone plates and the spray-painted names of every syndicate world that had ignored Earth's distress calls. They watched us suffer. They laughed while we starved in our own graves. Reddick wants restraint. He spit on the floor. Restraint is what killed Earth. A roar of agreement filled the room. In his private quarters, Reddick listened to Serac's broadcast on a cracked datapad. The message had been intercepted 2 hours earlier by Brenner's intel crew, but it had already spread across 3 Earthborn fleets before they could jam it. Brenner stood near the bulkhead, arms crossed. "They're calling themselves the Ashborn now," he said. Reddick closed his eyes. "I knew Serac would go off the rails. I didn't think he'd take half the damned fleet with him." "More than half," Brenner said. "He's got support from 8 forward units, 3 intel nodes, and even Wren's gone dark. She was last seen meeting with his lieutenants." Reddick looked up sharply. "Wren?" Brenner didn't flinch. "She's never been loyal, Commander, only useful." Reddick's silence said it all. Wren wasn't on the bastion anymore. She'd slipped away 3 days earlier aboard a black ghost ship. No registry, no engine trail, no ID signature. It disappeared into the old orbital lanes of the Syndicate archives, where forgotten weapons and darker secrets slept under quiet stars. And she hadn't gone alone. With her were 2 operatives known only by their call signs, Silk and Meyer, both former AI-augmented tacticians from the failed Omega Line project, each of them capable of writing kill codes that could bring a planet's orbit down in 3 minutes. Wren didn't want to kill planets. She wanted to rewrite truth. She was building something far worse than bombs. She was building narratives. Across fringe systems, Earthborn broadcasts began to contradict each other. Some warned of new targets. Others retracted them. Some called for unity. Others declared Reddick a coward and traitor. To civilians and sympathizers, the Earthborn became impossible to follow. To enemies, they became predictable. And the Syndicate started taking advantage. In a surprise maneuver, the Syndicate deployed Strike Fleet Balthor, 6 dreadnoughts and a dozen destroyers, straight through the neutral zones. No warning, no declarations. Their target? Not Reddick. Serac. The Syndicate realized something critical. They didn't need to beat the Earthborn. They just needed to let them beat each other. Serac welcomed the fight. He broadcast the fleet's approach across every open channel, daring them to engage. "Let them come," he told his command staff, eyes blazing. "Let them witness a real Earthborn response." What followed was chaos. Serac's ships didn't hold formation. They didn't engage tactically. They charged. 5 destroyers destroyed in the first hour. 3 Earthborn corvettes gone. Hundreds of Earthborn soldiers lost. But Serac? He called it a victory, because the syndicate had retreated, even if it was to regroup, even if it was just to let the Earthborn bleed themselves dry. Reddick watched the battle reports in silence. Brenner paced behind him. "This is madness," Brenner muttered. "Serac's treating the war like a personal crusade. We're hemorrhaging people, resources, credibility." "And he's getting stronger," Reddick added quietly. "Every martyr he loses becomes another reason for others to join him." "Then we kill him," Brenner said flatly. "End it, before he turns Earth's cause into a suicide cult." Reddick said nothing, because the thought had already occurred to him. But Serac wasn't the only problem. Back on the bastion, a new faction had quietly emerged. Smaller, deadlier. They didn't march. They didn't speak. They assassinated. 3 mid-level Earthborn officers loyal to Reddick found dead within 48 hours. 1 drowned in a gravity chamber. Another suffocated inside a hacked exosuit. The 3rd was never found, just a blood trail that ended at an open airlock. The faction didn't name itself, but their signature was clear. A red circle carved into the walls near every kill site. An eclipse, the dark side of Earth's revival. Reddick finally called a meeting. One last attempt to hold the center. He summoned every senior Earthborn officer still loyal, 54 commanders from across 3 sectors. They met inside the Vengeance's war sanctum, the original warship, still battle-scarred, still feared by the galaxy. Reddick stood alone at the front. "I'm not going to make a speech," he said. "Then you better give us a reason to stay," one officer grunted. Reddick nodded. "I know some of you think I've failed. Maybe I have. I let Serac grow unchecked. I let Ren slip away. I wanted unity so badly I didn't see the fractures beneath it." Silence. Silence. "But I'm telling you now, if we don't stop this, ourselves, then the syndicate won't need to destroy us. We'll do it for them." Murmurs. Doubt. A few nods. "And what do we do?" another asked. "Hunt our own?" Reddick's eyes hardened. "If they're killing civilians, destabilizing colonies, turning this into a holy war?" He nodded slowly. "Then yes, we hunt our own." That night, 2 plans began unfolding simultaneously. Reddick initiated Operation Black Thread, a deep strike mission targeting Serac's command node on the rogue vessel Ashwalker. 3 infiltration teams. No orbital support. No warnings. Meanwhile, a secret message bounced across Earthborn networks, encoded in ancient Terran Morse. "The chain is rusted. Break the anchor. Rise free." It was Ren's call, to every sleeper agent she had ever activated. The coup had begun. And in the cold of space, as the stars burned without mercy, the last survivors of a dead world prepared to face each other not as brothers, but as executioners. Not all wars are against enemies. Some wars are against the people who used to be family. The Ashwalker drifted through dead space, cloaked in the shadows of an ancient gas giant's rings, silent as a predator in ambush. On board, Serac stood before his war map, eyes locked on a holographic projection of the Vengeance. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. But inside his chest, something burned, cold and righteous. He had become what Reddick was too afraid to be. Unforgiving. "I want full orbital mines deployed," he said. "Set targeting protocols to fire on any ship not broadcasting Ashborn protocols." A junior officer hesitated. "Commander, even Earth-born vessels?" Serac turned. His eyes said everything, especially Earth-born vessels. The officer nodded and obeyed. A few sectors away, 3 stealth transports shot through the void, hulls dark, engines silenced. Operation Black Thread was in motion. Inside the lead ship, Commander Reddick sat in silence, flanked by Brenner and Vossen, a former syndicate defector now loyal to the Vengeance's original cause. No one spoke. They were less than an hour from breaching Ashwalker's perimeter. Brenner finally broke the silence. "You still sure about this?" Reddick nodded. "If we let Serac live, Earth dies a second time, and this time it's by our hands." "You think he'll surrender?" Reddick looked away. "No." Back on the bastion, Wren watched both operations unfold simultaneously: the assassination of Serac and the quiet purge of Reddick's remaining loyalists. She had initiated Protocol Eclipse, a full data wipe of Earth's historical archives, replacing facts with a curated mythos. In her version of the future, Earth wasn't betrayed. It was sacrificed, reborn through fire, untainted by weakness. She didn't believe in sides anymore. Only control. As Reddick's team neared Ashwalker, an alarm triggered. "Passive sensor sweep just clipped us," Brenner hissed, pulling up the countermeasures. Reddick cursed. "Too close! Accelerate! Punch in now!" The transports shot forward, cloaks failing as proximity mines began blinking red. Too late. The first wave struck. A shudder tore through the hull. One of the transports ignited in a silent, blossoming fireball. The second went dark. Only Reddick's remained. "Deploy breach pods!" he barked. They fired like bullets, slamming into the Ashwalker's underbelly. Inside the dark, narrow halls, the war between Earthborn began. Serac stood calmly as the alarms blared. "Infiltrators, inevitable," he said, donning his customized exosuit, black, scarred, and inscribed with the names of cities lost during the collapse. "Prepare the hounds," he said. A wall opened, revealing 6 enhanced soldiers, Earthborn loyal to Serac, surgically altered for close-quarters brutality. No words, just blades and silence. "They came to stop a war," Serac muttered. "We'll show them what a real war looks like." Reddick's boots hit the steel floor of Ashwalker's docking bay. The air was stale. The lights flickered. Already gunfire echoed in the distance. Earthborn against Earthborn. No uniforms, no rules, just blood. Down in the lower levels, Brenner led a flanking team, clearing rooms one by one. He recognized faces. Some were men and women he'd trained with, fought with, saved on dead moons. Now he shot them, because if he didn't, they would shoot him. "Where's Serac?" he shouted into comms. "Command bridge, level 12, Vossen replied. "Reddick?" "Already en route." The closer Reddick got to Serac's command deck, the worse it became. Bodies, smoldering armor, exploded bulkheads. The ship groaned like it was dying, not from weapons, but from the weight of betrayal. Reddick stepped over a dying soldier, his face young. Too young. Maybe 19. The boy whispered, "We just wanted them to remember." Reddick knelt, took his hand. "I know," he said quietly. "I remember." The boy died seconds later. Serac was waiting. When Reddick entered the command bridge, the doors sealed behind him. Serac stood at the center, alone. No hounds, no guards, just him. He turned slowly, eyes lit by the red glow of damage warnings across his ship. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You forced my hand," Reddick replied, weapon still lowered. "It didn't have to be this way." Serac laughed. "It always had to be this way. You think the galaxy fears you? Number, they fear me. They fear the flame. They respect the one who burns. I don't want respect built on corpses. Then you'll die forgotten. Serac lunged. The fight wasn't graceful. It was brutal. Reddick was older, wiser, slower. Serac was stronger, feral, unhinged. They slammed into control consoles, fists crashing like thunder, blades flashing, armor cracking. Reddick drove his elbow into Serac's throat. Serac spun, slashing Reddick's shoulder open. Blood hit the floor. No words now. Just war. Finally, Reddick found an opening. He didn't hesitate. He drove the blade through Serac's chest. The younger man gasped, fell to his knees. He looked up, eyes dimming. "They'll never follow you now," he whispered. "I'm not here to be followed," Reddick said. He let Serac fall. And with that, the war between Earthborn had a victor. Back on the bastion, Ren received the news. Serac dead. The Ashwalker vented to vacuum. Most of the Ashborn routed or in retreat. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She simply smiled. Because Serac had done what she needed. He'd tarnished the Earthborn forever. Now, no matter who won, they'd be remembered not as victims, not as heroes, but as something else, something feared. And fear, she had learned, was power. Reddick returned to the bastion, wounds stitched, command reasserted. He broadcast live across every Earthborn fleet, his voice weary but firm. "I killed Serac," he said plainly. "He was one of us, and he betrayed everything we stood for." No applause, no cheers, just silence. And then, slowly, orders resumed. Fleet coordination returned. Splinter units stood down. Earthborn unity, fragile, scarred, held. For now. But the scars would never fade. Reddick sat alone in the war room later that night, staring at the old Earth flag draped across the far wall, faded, burned at the edges. Brenner entered quietly. "You did it," he said. Reddick didn't look away. "Did I?" Brenner said nothing, because there was no answer. Weeks passed. The Vengeance moved deeper into Syndicate space, but not as a conqueror, not as an executioner, as a warning. No more total war, no more blind retaliation. Now, they targeted only the architects of the old betrayal, the policymakers, the silencers, the ones who watched Earth burn and turned away. They called it the final list, and it grew shorter by the day. The galaxy never welcomed the Earthborn back, but it never forgot them again, either. Because somewhere out there, in the cold of the stars, there was still a shadow large enough to silence entire civilizations. Not a god, not a monster, just a memory, carved into steel, fueled by loss, and led by a man who still walked with ghosts.